My name's Eric Welander. Welcome back to my channel. Today it's time to answer your questions. And I want to give a special thanks to everyone who submitted questions for this Q&A episode. I got a lot of really good questions and I'm not going to be able to get to them all in this video, but I do want to say a common theme that I saw was, what is your pick for such and such product, or what would you recommend for this? And some of those we'll talk about because they require a little more context. But if you want to see just my general recommendations for products that work with Apple HomeKit, you can go to HomeKitPicks.com and that'll redirect you to a page on my website where you can go and see all of the different products I recommend in different categories. But let's jump into the questions. First, we'll start with a spicy one from Eric, which is, why doesn't Apple pay more attention to HomeKit? Why is HomeKit lacking so many quality of life features when compared to other assistants? Now, I think the thing that's important to not lose sight of here is that Apple does care about smart home tech. Apple does care about HomeKit, and I think that goes all the way up to Tim Cook. It's clearly a core piece of their technology stack. They ship a home app in all of their major operating systems. They just redid their one for the Apple Watch this year. But I do think there are a couple things that might be holding Apple back from pushing their smart home strategy even further and even faster. And one of those is that, like a lot of Apple's apps, their releases are tied to larger iOS releases. So that means you just get less software releases in any given year. And so that gives engineers less opportunities to fix bugs and things that might stack up and then go in the next big iOS release. We finally, in iOS 14.7 got named multiple timers for Siri. So, and I know some of the intelligence with Siri is done in the cloud. So there's some of that can be unhinged from a particular iOS release as far as I understand. But that also applies as well to the HomePods, because the HomePods operating system gets updated with an iOS release as well. So it would be nice to see some of these pieces of software be able to be updated outside of a big deal iOS release. I think then, what if the Home app could get new little bug fixes or features like once a month or every other week? That would be really nice, and it just installs automatically, just like all the other smart home apps you have on your phone. Now, that said, I think one of the other things that's holding Apple back is that strategically, they have a lot of other things they do that have a lot more of a giant user base and sources of increased revenue than smart home tech. So I think they need to do a good enough job in smart home tech to make sure that another competitor doesn't lure you away, so then you decide to use the Amazon phone because your whole home is Amazon. So they need a strategy there, but I think there are plenty of other things they're focused on and have more company energy behind, just because they're a public company and they need to focus on what is likely to bring the biggest growth in their revenue. And quite frankly, I don't think smart home tech is always that for Apple. And lastly on this, I get the sense that the HomePod Mini was a really nice success for Apple in 2020. And I think that hopefully turned some heads within the company. And it sounds like, from rumors from various people like Mark Gurman, that maybe Apple is starting to focus more on some smart home tech products like a new smart display. But Apple is a very, very big ship. And so doing those kinds of products takes time. And I can imagine that all of the shortages and challenges we've had this year have only made things like that more difficult. And that said, it also applies to the software side, in that Apple has a huge user base. If you're thinking about an app that's sent to every single iPhone in the world, that is a huge responsibility and something that you need to have really secure and really well made. So making updates to something like Apple's Home app is or the HomeKit APIs or anything under the hood like that, it's a non-trivial task. And so something that to us just seems like, well, why don't they just, whatever it is, insert this? it's probably a lot more complicated than you might think. And that's also just because smart home tech itself has lots of different variables with it. And so they're having to solve for a bunch of different cases up front that you might not have even considered when you want a feature. And that gets back to my whole point of if they could just simply release more updates to their home app and other, HomeKit things outside of iOS releases, then I think maybe they'd be able to iterate on some of this stuff faster, because some of this stuff with smart home tech, you just don't know until you get a bunch of people using it in all of their different weird setups. Don't worry, I'm not going to spend that long answering every single question, but I did think it was an interesting way to kick off the discussion. So Technical Jack 2039 asks, what was your first HomeKit accessory? So for me, it was Philips Hue lights. So I got some of the Philips Hue white bulbs, added those to HomeKit with a hub, and then I was able to turn the lights on at sunset, I think, and then off at a particular time. And then it also used that to sort of have them go on and off when we were away from our apartment. So it looked like we were home because there was street access to where we lived. But let me know in the comments below, what was your first HomeKit accessory? It's always a fun thing to talk about. Archie asks, it seems no one can agree on Wi-Fi router settings for an optimal, reliable HomeKit network. Some say you should have a common SSID, that's like your network name. Some say you should have separate SSIDs for 2.4 and 5 gigahertz bands. What would you recommend for overall network settings? I tend to keep it simple in my home and just have one SSID or one network name for everything. I don't have a separate network for my smart home devices. But I don't think that people who do that are wrong. I think there are benefits to both. I've just decided on that trade-off. I'd rather pick simplicity rather than having multiple networks to manage. And then generally, other than that, I just keep the settings as is. But there is one modification that I usually like to make and have for my accessories in my home, which is if you have a device that you're going to be using a lot in your smart home, or that's been up and down problematic for you and it does connect to your network, give it a static IP address. And then that seems to be a lot more reliable. So, just give it a DHCP reservation, a static IP. So that way it's not changing addresses on your local network periodically. Patrick Wessels asks, when do you think we will see single device, multiple user iPadOS support? So I think this is something that will be coming sometime soon. I think it's enough requested feature. And I think, well, yes, Apple would love if everybody just bought their own iPads. That's not realistic for everyone. And I would imagine that this is something where Apple sees they could push people into higher storage tiers of iPads if you're going to be storing more than one person's stuff on the device. They've already done a kind of workaround for this in situations like education and some of their custom education stuff in iOS and managed device things there. But I would think that eventually they're going to add it to iPadOS, and maybe that'll be in iPadOS 16 next year, if not 17. I think we're probably at most like 2 years away from that. I really hope. And Apple keeps talking about the iPad as it's a computer, but one of the key features that it's still missing is that it doesn't have multi-user support. And one sign that I've seen externally about this is you start to see Apple increasing the amount of RAM, especially in their higher end iPads, and I think that'll continue. So as more devices get more RAM, that'll open them up to perform better with multi-user switching. And maybe this would even be a feature that Apple limits to certain iPads because of that. We'll just have to see. But I think at the end of the day, it's easy for us on the outside to underestimate just how difficult adding one of these kinds of features to iPadOS might be, especially if you think about the whole assumption from the first iPhone on is that there's one user for the device. I would like to see it in the next couple of years. I think it's reasonable to expect it in the next couple of years, but again, hard to say. Martin asks, hi Eric, I'm a huge fan of your channel from the Netherlands. When do you expect the first locks on the market that support home keys for wallet? So if you're not familiar, Apple announced in June at their WWDC conference that they're adding this feature called HomeKeys or HomeKey to the Wallet app. And this is similar to what they announced last year for Car Key, although not many cars support that at least yet, so it's not been very much in the public. But the idea is that you have some kind of a key for your home tied to the Wallet app, which means that then as you hold up your phone or your watch to the door, it will recognize that, I guess it's NFC inside of the door, and then that will trigger the phone to use the key in Wallet to unlock it. So you don't have to open an app like the Home app or whatever app that comes with your smart lock to open the door. You just tap your iPhone or tap your Apple Watch on the door and it'll unlock. So I think these will probably start to come around CES time of next year. So January, we'll start to see announcements from companies about when they're going to start shipping actual locks. And then my guess is we probably won't actually see these on the market and able to buy them until maybe March of next year. We might see like 1 or 2 vendors slip in before then, but I really think it would probably be more like a March of 2022 kind of time frame. Sanjeev asks, I'm all in on HomeKit. I need something for a door camera, keyless entry, and such. Not sure what to get. By the way, we're neighbors. I'm in Naperville. Hi to Naperville from another part of the Chicagoland area. I would say back to the keyless entry. If you can avoid buying a smart lock until you see what the options are for HomeKey, I think that would be good because I think it's going to be really cool to just tap your phone or your Apple Watch to your door and have it unlock without having to open any apps or anything. And then for a doorbell that works with HomeKit, there aren't really any good options at this point that I recommend because of the Logitech Circle View doorbell having all these overheating issues. If you do have a shaded porch where your actual doorbell doesn't get a lot of direct sunlight, then you might consider the Logitech Circle View doorbell. But otherwise, I would look at doing something like a Eufy Cam 2 or Eufy Cam 2 Pro that works with HomeKit Secure Video and point that at your front door, but just mount it somewhere nearby on the outside of your house, and then you'll be able to get a clear view of who's at the door. You won't have quite the integration of the doorbell just yet, but that'll at least get you most of the way there. And then maybe down the road, when we have more options for hopefully HomeKit doorbells, you can upgrade that. You could also look at just going all in on another video system like Arlo or Eufy, and then just viewing the video in the Apple Home app, and then managing the recordings and the doorbell actions in that other app. But again, that's not going all in with HomeKit, which is what Sanjeev is asking. Casey asks, how does a human being survive Chicago winters? Well, Casey, that's a very good question. I would say you just need to invest in a good jacket that will keep you warm. And, as annoying as it can be to be inside over the winter, as someone who takes care of a yard and gardens and stuff around my home, I really do enjoy this kind of hard reset over the winter where all of the plants and bugs go dormant or die, and then you just have a new version of it in the spring. So I have sympathy for, let's say, people in California or Virginia or other places where maybe it doesn't get as cold in the winter, and then you don't get quite as much of that, just everything goes dormant for a few months before you kind of reboot. And we don't have all the problems of shoveling the driveway like every day like some places do. So it's not too bad once you get used to it, but it's of course annoying and just something we have to deal with. Steven asks, how can I make my downlights that are dimmable smart without using a hub, and one that's available in Australia? And what are the best blinds that are custom made? Well, the first question I don't really have an answer to because the things that come to mind to me are something like a Cara or Lutron Caseta or a Philips Hue. They have some sort of in-wall stuff now, but all of those require hubs. So if you have an idea for Steven, just drop it in the comments below. The second question, I would go honestly with the Lutron Caseta Serena Shades that works with their Caseta system. I was really impressed with the details of how you could custom build that, but unfortunately, it's not available in Australia. So the search is still out for possibilities there that are custom, because of course you can get some things from like IKEA, but it's not to the level of granularity of custom that you can get with something like Serena Shades, where you're picking the details of the fabric and all of the finishes around the whole thing. Daniel asks, what sort of apps do you develop for work? So I build apps for iPhone and iPads, which I write in Apple's Swift programming language. So I use their app Xcode all day long to build apps. And I tend to focus through my employer Martiancraft for a client that buys a bunch of iPhones and iPads for their workforce, and they want custom software that then enables their workforce to do their job more efficiently and effectively. And so these apps talk to all their different back-end systems and present all kinds of data in certain ways just to help people get the right information at the right time and have the right, questions in front of them to go through whatever kind of tasks they're doing. And it kind of fits in with this whole thing of I love smart home tech because I love productivity and workflow and how you get jobs done. And so that's why I'm always into productivity apps, and a lot of my YouTube watching is filled up with productivity gurus and people like that. So it just kind of all ties together, I think. And it's my motivation as smart home tech is sort of the productivity and streamline your life kind of angle. And if you don't know, I also make my own app called Best Photos, which is about cleaning up your photo library. I have a version for iOS 15 that's in the works, but it's not ready yet. But you're going to go check that out on the App Store, and there's a link in the description. Leland asks, what Thread routers work in HomeKit without a HomePod Mini or Apple TV 4K Gen 2? Eve Energy, Eero router, Nanoleaf shapes, or any I missed? So one of the things that you need with this is a Thread border router, which basically connects your Thread network to your Apple HomeKit network. And that's what a HomePod Mini or an Apple TV 4K with Thread do. And potentially, I haven't tried this, maybe it would work with an Eero router, but I would say you want to have probably one of the Apple Thread routers to make a Thread network on HomeKit actually workable. Now, this might evolve and change as Matter becomes more of a thing, and then you could potentially use other border routers from other companies that then HomeKit can also see and use to talk to the Thread devices. But again, I think if you want things to for sure be reliable, or the first use case, I would say having a HomePod Mini or Apple TV 4K Gen 2 in your smart home is going to be your best options for smart home hubs. And then those also communicate with Thread devices. Now, of course, if you just have an earlier generation Apple TV, then the only reason to upgrade is for Thread. But I would say if you're asking that question, then maybe it is, but I don't know. It's tough to say. It's a lot of money. Maybe just get a HomePod instead, and you can have multiple hubs in your home and they can serve different purposes. So it doesn't have to be your main and only hub that supports Thread. But again, you need the border router to sort of connect the two networks. Jesse asks, when can we expect more Matter and Thread announcements as far as new products or updates on current products? So I think especially for Matter products, we might see a few more smart home announcements this fall, but I think for Matter specific stuff, we'll start to get a better picture at CES, where hopefully a lot of companies will start to show what they're going to be releasing over the course of 2022, and that will hopefully include more accessories that will work with Matter. Although related to that, Aqara has recently come out and said, talked about their plans for working with Matter, and it's their new M2 hub as well as their M1S hub. Those will work with Matter. So their G2H hub unfortunately won't work with Matter, but their other hubs will then be able to connect all your Aqara sensors to Matter. So that's a new development since I think we've last talked about it on this channel. Brandon asks, what are the most reliable products? Trying to get rid of all the no response errors. So yes, we all love those no responses on the tile in HomeKit for whatever accessory. And I would think about this in a few different levels. One is you want to look at your home network. Is there any way that you can improve your Wi-Fi signal, make more things work over hard wires? That can really help boost your just connection between all your different smart home devices. Another thing related to that is thinking about how those devices connect. Maybe it's Thread. Maybe you need a HomePod Mini or another Thread device closer to that device that's frequently not responding to get it to work well. Again, Thread has a great range, but it's not infinite. You might also consider that with Bluetooth or Wi-Fi. Is it bad Wi-Fi signal? And also going back to my previous comment, static IP addresses are a great way to make devices on your HomeKit network be hopefully more responsive and reliable if they're not changing their IP address. Brian asks, what's the one HomeKit product you can't live without? So I'm going to stretch this definition a little bit and say it's my AirPlay multi-room audio setup. So that is a collection of HomePod Minis, original HomePods, and Sonos speakers that all work with AirPlay 2. They're all visible within the Home app. And we use this as a family on a daily basis. If there's like the thing in my smart home that I use the most, it's that. And we just love listening to different music from Apple Music, and we play it in different rooms and move it between rooms. And I've had a video in my queue to do for this channel for a while on all the ins and outs of AirPlay and playing multi-room audio. And so definitely let me know if you're interested in that. It's something that I've been thinking about and have done various versions of that I've kind of scrapped. But yeah, if you want to see a video all about the ins and outs of AirPlay, let me know in the comments, and I'll certainly work on making that a reality. Kevin asks, if you got a new home and you couldn't mix and match, what ecosystem would you go all in with? So I think what Kevin's talking about is if I got a new home and I didn't want to mix and match different smart home companies and I just wanted to simplify and go with as few as possible, what would I do? And my answer would be that I would go all in with Lutron. So I would just have a Lutron hub, and I put Lutron switches in all the switches everywhere, so all the lights were smart from Lutron, and I get Serena shades for all of the shades. I mean, we're talking about some serious money investment here, but it's really reliable stuff, and I think that would be really nice to just have the whole home be on Lutron. And one of the reasons I say that beyond just their reliability is things like their motion sensor tie really well into their switches. So if you're using all their stuff, their motion sensor has some advanced stuff that you can't as easily get in something like Apple HomeKit. And they also have been working on adding some other new features I keep meaning to talk more about. They have a smart away feature, which I need to test it more before I talk to you guys about it, but it looks really cool on the surface, where it'll do sort of that turning lights on and off randomly and shades up and down and things when you're away from the home. So yeah, short answer, Lutron. Hugo asks, I have a closet with no lights. What's a good option to put in there? So I've gotten some just basic work lights from my local hardware store that will clamp onto anything, and those are great to just, you can clamp them wherever in the closet you can find a place, and then if you can run power to them and then either use a smart bulb in the lamp or connect a smart plug at the other end, then you can use something like an Eve door and window sensor, which doesn't require a hub and just works with Apple HomeKit, and then you can open the door and then have the lights turn on when you open the door. There are plenty of other options of ways to automate that. You could also use something like a Philips Hue dimmer switch to give yourself an effect of a light switch in the closet without actually having to wire a light switch. So those are some things to consider. Caresa Consulting, I hope I pronounced that right, asks, what HomeKit devices have you found helped increase productivity in your work? So I would say making all the lighting in a room smart. It really makes a difference with, you're able to create all these different scenes of levels of lighting, whether it's dim before you go to bed or very bright during the day when you're trying to get work done. Just being able to control that with taps of a button to set all these different lights in different places just how you like it for different purposes in your life, that can really set the right environment for working or having fun or doing whatever. And that, in my opinion, increases your productivity because it's helping you follow through with the intentions you have of what you're trying to do with your time. Gavin Ball 13 asks, has iOS 15 messed up any of your shortcuts or automations, like if statements or sensor triggers? So no, it hasn't messed up any of those for me. There was a bug in the release candidate for iOS 15 where if you talk to Siri on your phone and tried to trigger an Apple HomeKit device, it would say it couldn't do it. So they've gotten that fixed. But this gets me thinking about one closing thought to leave you with, which is with all of my smart home stuff, I'm always experimenting and trying new things. I'm always adding new automations, but I'm also pruning back and getting rid of accessories, getting rid of automations, or at least just disabling them if I'm not actively using them or benefiting from them. Because if you just have too many layers of too much stuff and the marginal benefit for you isn't all that great, then it just adds a lot more complication to your life and your smart home. And so it's important to continue to keep looking at how do you make things in your smart home more simple, as you're also looking at what things can you add to make things better in a certain way. So it's all about experimenting, but just don't forget to also prune back. And this also applies to things that are overly complex. I used to have a really complex system for automating the lights in my garage. I made a video about it here on the channel, but since then I've stopped using that whole system entirely, and I just actually turn on the lights and turn off the lights in the garage. And of course I make sure they're off when I go to sleep or when we leave the house or stuff. But it's like, I don't need all of these extra automations for if the door's open and the garage door's closed and there's motion here or not motion there. Like, that gets to be so many layers that you just introduce a lot of chances for unreliability. And you also make your life maintaining your smart home a lot more complicated than it probably needs to be. Now, before you leave this video, thanks for watching until the end. I do have a secret project linked in the description below where you can sign up to be notified when it launches in the coming weeks. I'm very excited about it, and it may or may not involve newsletters. So thanks again so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.